imagine if we think about engineering in Uruguay, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago at this point, right? It was not very common that there were a lot of women in technology. I was the only girl in the class. I teamed up with two classmates and I convinced them to do a project that had to do with makeup. The idea was to help people find the right product for them. And one of the big struggles are for the people that use foundation. That is, how can we extract the color from a face in a very accurate way and then match it with something that will actually show in a way that it's like kind of like looks good on you, right? And that's when the journey of my company started. We got the support from local government institutions that supported people building innovation. And so through that, we managed to actually start our little project. Now, we managed to get L'Oreal, which is one of the biggest makeup brands in Uruguay and even the world, right? To actually help us as mentors in the program. So we started like that. They were mentoring us, and by the end of the project, a year after, they told us, "Hey, I want this in the stores." And it didn't look like this, by the way. It had evolved already to look something nicer, right? And we said, like, "Oh, you want to put it in the stores, like in a real store, in a retail store?" And they're like, "Yeah, I think this works." We are like, "Oh, okay, great." So like we made a license agreement without knowing much what we were doing. And they signed an agreement for a year with us for 5 different stores to have this prototype. So I always say that I ended up in entrepreneurship really not knowing what I was doing, right? I was like just right out of college, in college, actually, when I started it. Didn't had any work experience. I had just worked, well, I had interned in 2 companies. So I had worked 6 months in a software development company, 6 months in another software development company. And then now suddenly I had my company. I ended up in this because I always felt passionate about creating things, right? And creating technology, right? But the reality is that I didn't, as I said, I didn't have much experience. So the path I'm going to talk about, right? Like right now, that is a story of success that could have gone wrong many times, right? Started in a very amateur way, right? And the learnings on the way that I'm going to talk about are really how I think we can learn by doing, right? And that's the story of my life. I was like, I studied engineering, but I didn't have a business background. I didn't have connections. I didn't have a lot of work experience, but I ended up starting my company, and 8 years after now ended up selling it to Ulta Beauty, which is one of the biggest retailer in the US of makeup. So imagine stand here 2010, Uruguay, this girl that finished engineering, has her prototype, sold it to like a local brand, right? And then I started thinking, okay, we need to sell this to other companies, right? So what did I do was like, well, I had me and my co-founder, we were 2 at the time. We got interns that were interning from the university, and we started pitching it to other companies. And in that path, it was of course very challenging because we were a very small team and we didn't know much what we were doing, right? So we encountered Startup Chile, which was an accelerator, and that it was in Chile, that actually brought together 100 different companies from everywhere in the world. Okay, so Startup Chile gave you $40,000. You had to move to Chile for 6 months, and you could then receive like mentorship and money, right? Asking you for no equity at all. I moved to Chile. I lived 6 months there. I interacted with a lot of entrepreneurs from everywhere in the world, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot from my American entrepreneurs that were there, my classmates, right? I started feeling that I was not very different to the other entrepreneurs that were on the program, right? I mean, people came from all over the world, and I sort of at the beginning, I all my life I was like, oh, Silicon Valley, right? And you idealize like what is there, and the entrepreneurs that are there, and you know, like what entrepreneurs know and what I need to know to actually start a business. And am I good enough? Am I not? Do I know enough? Do I not? Right? All these insecurities that you have when you're starting a business, right? And more when you're doing it for the first time with not a lot of experience. So that's when this journey starts. That this photo, I took it in 2014 in the BART in San Francisco. I live in San Francisco now, by the way. I don't know if I said that. I've been living here for 6 years. so I took this photo. That was when I stepped San Francisco, and I see this and say, this is a startup city, so start something. As I continue over time, in 2015, we got accepted into 500 startups, which was amazing. And of course, 500 opened me a lot of doors to connections and other entrepreneurs. And I was kind of like feeling like, okay, I'm understanding more this market, right? Still, I was struggling to get funding, right? I was struggling to get clients. I was pitching to clients, and clients were like, what, you're a startup? Like, where is your team in Uruguay? Where is Uruguay? What are you talking about, right? All these like questions that people are like, why are you here? Like, I don't trust you, right? All of that when you're starting a company, it happens, right? Because you don't have the credibility that a big company has. You just have yourself. And so how do you build actually a bond and trust with a company, with an investor, with a mentor? And that's a huge challenge, right? And it's something that I realized that in the end, now looking backwards, that everybody that helped me on the way were because they believed in me. They saw something on me.